Hello, and welcome back. In this video, I wanted to ramble a little bit about religious belief and the ways in which these beliefs tend to fluctuate and falter throughout many people's lives. And not just with religious belief, but the absence of religious belief in many cases can also heavily fluctuate throughout many people's lives. And the most common cause, one of the most common catalysts to this is confrontations with suffering and tragedy and evil. These sorts of things can cause us to not take our religious beliefs or absence of for anywhere near as for granted as we had prior to coming closer to what it means to suffer. And this is quite common, especially in the modern day. Now that, especially when people are quite young, it's very easy for people, again, with both people who identify as Christians, for example, and people who identify as atheists, for example, it's very easy to take these claims, what you feel to be true about what you are here on earth for, why you're here, is there a mission, what the mission is, all these very important, what happens after death, things like this, these very important questions and the answers to them. When you're young, you're far more likely to take these sorts of questions for granted. You're not going to take them as seriously as you are until you come closer and closer to recognizing that life is a very, the stakes are very high here. You are going to have to experience some eventually. And my life, my life has been easy as shit so far. All things considered, it has been relatively very easy. In spite of, I've had some bumps in the road, but, relatively speaking, I don't know what it is to suffer. That I can quite confidently say. And it's important to note that because it's very easy for me to take my absence of religious belief for granted and not really take as seriously all the implications of my absence of belief. Just to not take it as seriously, to not take those questions and the potential answers to those questions. I won't hold them as high, in high regard. The importance of them won't be as clear because of the fact that I'm still rather young and I still have yet to find out what it truly means to suffer. I have yet to find out just how high the stakes are here. For my own, subjectively speaking, I can see it outside of myself. I can see it from a distance, but this is insufficient in really having a deep enough appreciation for the stakes that are involved. So you have many people, for example, who are quite young, say, late teens, early 20s, who identify as atheists, and they will confidently claim that, how can you believe in some wacky shit like that? How can you take the idea of being in possession of an eternal soul and that soul is going to live on for every eternity? And what you do here on this planet will determine the outcome of this soul, whether or not it will live on forever in paradise, just incomprehensible paradise forever, or will it burn in hell forever? Just horrors beyond comprehension, everlasting, or paradise beyond comprehension, for everlasting. And that's a hell of a thing to believe, of course. And yeah, but to claim that everyone who's in possession of this sort of belief is stupid, I do feel is an oversimplification. And because you have many people who just have become far more intimate with the stakes that are involved and have gotten very significant tastes of what is to be experienced here, the terrors of existence. They have gotten to know these far more closely for themselves, subjectively, and they have come closer to facing their own mortality, for example. They've come closer and closer to recognizing that this vessel that they're in possession of is going to perish in a matter of no time. And this transient little existence that we have is worth absolutely nothing if there is some sort of, everlasting life after this. So, and that's a big reason why you find so many people willing to sacrifice the entirety of their lives here if they're under the belief that that will reward them just incomprehensible rewards in the hereafter. The point is, it's very easy on both sides for people when they're quite young, living in the modern day, because you see it again with many people who identify as Christians, say when they're 20 years old, and you can see it in their fucking eyes, you can see it in their faces, you can see it in their behaviors in the world. There is just no goddamn way that they genuinely believe in what they identify as, what they claim to believe. They're nowhere near fully. If they believe it at all, they're not taking it seriously. And they might claim to, there's just no way, because they wouldn't conduct them if they were genuinely under the belief that this little tiny portion of time that we have here and what we do with that will determine the outcomes of our eternal soul forever. There's no way that they would conduct themselves in the ways that they so often do. And you'll see that very commonly with people who are religious at quite a young age. They will have genuine confrontations with suffering, with the tragedy of life, and you'll have it in many cases where a questioning will occur, a very deep questioning of religious belief will occur, and from there, their beliefs will either become strengthened, and they'll start conducting themselves more closely to more closely to what they claim to believe. Their actions will reflect that. If this religious belief does help them in weathering that the storm of life, the suffering that is to come. And then you have people one thing's for sure, existence is fucking weird. It's strange. This experience that we're having, it's easy to take that for granted. It's way easier to take that for granted when things are going well. It is. Whether you're a Christian or an atheist, it's very easy to take the oddness of this experience for granted. And I am incredibly guilty of this. And if you fail to recognize that this experience that you're having right now is a very strange thing, it's not because it isn't. I would argue that it's because you are in possession of some very deeply rooted psychological repressions. And yeah, especially if you're quite young and you've always felt a certain way, whether you're religious or not, and life is gonna, odds are you're gonna start questioning some shit. And if you fail to recognize the strangeness of life and the fact that the stakes are very high and all these sorts of things, just take some hallucinogenic drugs, and that'll do it. I'm not going to do that, because too much reality is a bad thing. That is what I believe. That too much, it can't. There are some doors to the mind that are absolutely left closed, and for some people, those doors are just depending upon your brain chemistry, some doors are just way too open, and that'll cause lots of psychological suffering. And I think it's best to leave some of those doors closed if you can help it. What was it? Religious belief? Religious belief. We take the strangeness of life for granted. We do. We absolutely do. Um, not only the strangeness, but the horrors of life. And I know that sounds fucking dramatic. And like I said, I'm not speaking from personal experience. I've been quite lucky thus far. My life has been, especially relatively speaking, I've had it so goddamn easy so far. But yeah, that can really do it. Genuine, full confrontations with what it means to suffer can, simply put, there's no greater force in fighting against the natural arrogance of youth, for example, just coming closer and closer to recognizing that this life thing is, the stakes are high. You have a lot to lose. You have a hell of a lot to lose, and your odds are you're far more invested into this life thing than you believe that you are. Many people who don't fully recognize just how invested they are, how much they stand to lose. It's easy to underestimate that as well, especially when things are going rather well. So I mean, the point is, if you're rather young and life has been relatively easy thus far, whether you're religious or you're an atheist or you're probably going to gradually, at the very least, take more seriously. Maybe not even necessarily question them deeply, but you're at least going to take more seriously the questions of, is there something after we die? And what we do here now with this tiny portion of time that we've been afforded, for better or worse, what you do with that, will that have any sort of impact on what is to come after you die? Questions like that, we really do take the answers to those questions, whether it's yes or no, for granted when we're young and fortunate. And we're constantly being propelled through time. So we're going to have to, some things are going to have to be experienced, and those experiences, some of them will really pry our eyes open and seeing things that we don't want to see. We'd rather not see them, but see them we will. And that's terrifying to think about. Future outcomes, because there are so many that are very painful. All right, we're at the 13-minute mark. I think I'm done rambling. I'm going to go for a hike with my dog for a few hours. I've been looking forward to that. It's going to be nice. It's a beautiful day. Weather's been shit lately, and finally, it's a pretty day. The last thing I want to add, for the last couple of months, I've mentioned on this channel that I've been dealing with health issues. I've been pissing from my stomach into a drainage bag attached to my left leg here, and this situation, it's very, very strange. When you talk about how people are capable of adjusting to certain forms of malfunction, like bodily malfunction, when you talk about certain things, like this, for me, hasn't been that difficult of a thing to deal with. And it's not because I'm psychologically strong-willed. It's because it hasn't really put that big of a damper on the reason as to why it hasn't put that big of a damper on my quality of life is because it hasn't really gotten all that far in the way of what I enjoy doing with my time. It hasn't been that big of a deal. And then like the surgery that's coming, I haven't been that anxious about it. And I also feel like that's because, well, one is psychological repression. I'm naturally gifted in that area. I'm nervous, of course, and I'm going to be incredibly anxious when I'm in that operating room and they're about to put me under. That's when it's going to really, really set in. But as of now, I've been taking it quite well. And just the whole situation of having this drainage bag and having this, it's been annoying, But more than anything, that's what it's been. It's just been a bit of it's been a bit cumbersome, it's been a bit annoying, but it hasn't been this very, very substantial, it hasn't taken really anything away from my quality of life. And that's weird to think about. Just the way in which certain things, we are capable of adjusting quite well to certain things that go wrong, far easier than we likely believe ourselves to be able to. But the differences that exist between individuals and what we're able to cope with and the ways in which we're able to cope with them, that's going to vary a lot. And that's another fucking weird thing about life, just how certain experiences are molded by our perception of those experiences. And the final thing is meditation. I recommend that just little portions of time spent every day, just at least little portions should be spent in meditation, just sitting with yourself, sitting with your thoughts, bringing it back to the breath. All that shit is very good for the mind and coping with things, because it can become this source of pleasure that is very easy to access. And when it comes to malfunctions like this, I can very easily access it. It doesn't get in the way of things like meditation or just enjoying a nice walk, the simple pleasures. Whereas if I was a sex addict and I was having this bodily malfunction, I would be in a very, very dark place right now, psychologically speaking. So I'm glad that I'm not a sex addict. But the point is, try to cultivate certain forms of pleasure, of well-being that you're able to hold on to through the rocky portions of life. And they're coming. They are coming. You want to be able to cope with what's to come to the best of your ability. And for some people, religious belief helps a lot in that. I'm done rambling. I'm going to go for a hike. Goodbye, and I wish you all a good day.